When we talk about the authenticity of materials and how to find them, how to put them together, again, every project is different. The trick is knowing what it is you want to restore, and that's based on that evidence we talked about. So again, the varnished walnut doors, we know because there are two original walnut doors that survived the fire of 1845. And we'll look at one of those. So how do we know what this should look like for hardware? This was a case where we have written records where Jefferson's ordering a certain kind of mortise lock. That means a lock that's hidden inside the door. We have archaeological pieces found on the site that show a certain type of knob or a scutcheon or a night latch. And then we have evidence of what Jefferson's doing at Monticello and the University of Virginia. These three groups of things, evidence, don't always mesh. And one of the things that we realized was that the doors in the house come over a 10-year period. So originally, in 1806, Jefferson has some hardware that he already has at Monticello that is in fashion in 1800s, let's say. Then he's getting hardware from Richmond, which is coming from England, and he just says, send me the best brass mortise lock. He doesn't say, give me a round knob, give me an escutcheon like this for the keyhole, give me this. He just says, give me the best mortise lock. And so to reconcile all these different kinds of evidence that don't seem to match up, we can look at our two original doors and see what the hardware was on those doors. But how do we reconcile the things that archaeology found that we know were in the house? So what we did was we have two sets of reproduction hardware. One set looks like this with a round knob. The other is an oval and a different escutcheon. And the reality is Jefferson had a mixture of hardware in the house. And most houses were built over a long period, and nothing was matching in some houses. Sometimes they waited, 10 years to do something, and it was a different style. So this is how we had to reconcile evidence that didn't seem to match with each other. This is an example here. And again, all of the woodwork gets painted, except the varnished walnut window sash and the door. This is, anybody would look at this and say, that is a very beautiful, significant type of pine. It's a quarter sawn pine, heartwood. This is the kind of material that you would use for the best houses, but it's always painted. You wouldn't see the quality of the old growth, grainy, and heartwood. We didn't buy this stuff, which costs a fortune today because it comes from salvaged buildings. We are recycling the floorboards that we took out of the house that were put in after the fire in 1846. So instead of going out and buying this material at great cost, we've repurposed some of those floorboards. You don't need to save a whole house of floorboards for evidence and archival reasons. You could, but what's the sense of that? So we have reused some of that. And the little molding, there's a little tiny molding on these panels that we'll see is related to the doors, a little molding on the doors. And that's kind of a signature of John Hemmings and his apprentices. So I'll bring up that subject now. John Hemmings was an enslaved craftsman at Monticello. He works under a number of white workers that Jefferson hires to build Monticello. Eventually, he's working under a very skilled Irish house joiner. Joiner means he does fine work. And by 1809, all those white workers have left Monticello to go work on Montpelier. And John Hemmings is the master craftsman at that point. So when it comes to do all the finished work at Poplar Forest, inside and outside, John Hemmings and his crew, or his gang, do all the finish work. Jefferson hires white guys to do the framing, the brickwork, the structural pieces, and even the hired white guys are always using enslaved craftsmen. Almost every contractor, builder of any means has enslaved workers that were either skilled or unskilled. So John Hemmings is the master craftsman. We can say that all of this house, Poplar Forest, is John Hemmings' masterpiece, as well as Jefferson's. This is Jefferson's very special place where he wanted to do special things. Hemmings is trusted to come here on his own, live for months and months at a time, working on these parts, making all these things on site, mostly with hand tools. The very poignant part of this story is that John Hemmings' three nephews, Beverly, Eston, and Madison Hemmings, are Jefferson's children, illegitimate children, with Sally Hemmings. And they are working here under their uncle's guidance for years, putting together all the finished favorite parts of Jefferson. And Jefferson never mentions them. The granddaughters who come with Jefferson don't mention these young men. And you can imagine they have a better status than most of the enslaved people at Monticello because they now have the skill that gives them, a higher level of working and living. And they happen to be the very few people that are freed in Jefferson's will. They are enslaved, but they can take pride in what they've learned. Then after they're freed, two of these men go out to the Ohio territory and become craftsmen and use these skills that they practiced on at Poplar Forest.